On the 15th of January, 2022, the seafloor near the islands of Tonga tore itself apart. An undersea volcano called Tonga erupted with the force of a large nuclear blast. Ash was thrown violently into the sky. A tsunami spread across the Pacific. And then, almost as an afterthought, an entire country went silent. Phones stopped. Banks stopped. Messages to family overseas simply failed to send. 100,000 people were cut off from the rest of the world, not for hours, but for weeks. Because everything Tonga sent to the outside world traveled through a single, fragile thread lying on the ocean floor, and the volcano had just destroyed it. The strange part isn't that this happened to Tonga. It's that the same quiet fragility sits beneath almost everyone, including the connection carrying these very words to you right now. We talk about the internet as if it lives in the air. We call it the cloud. We picture our data floating overhead, bouncing between satellites, weightless and everywhere. Almost none of that is true. Nearly all of the world's international data, by most estimates around 99% of it, never touches the sky. It travels through cables, physical cables lying on the bottom of the ocean in the cold and the dark. Today there are more than 600 of these systems, adding up to nearly 1.5 million kilometers of cables strung along the sea floor. The cloud, it turns out, is underwater. And here is the part that's hard to believe. Out in the deep ocean, one of these cables, a cable that might carry the internet for an entire continent, is no thicker than a garden hose, under 2 centimeters across. It isn't buried, it isn't guarded. It simply lies there on the seabed, in the dark, thousands of meters down. So how did the most important network humanity has ever built come to rest on something so thin, so exposed, so easy to break, and yet fail so rarely? The answer begins with a quiet idea from the 1960s. A physicist named Charles Cow had a realization. If you could make glass pure enough, purer than any glass that had ever existed, you could send light down a thin fiber of it for enormous distances, and the light would barely fade. Most people thought it was impossible. He was proven right, and in 2009 he was given the Nobel Prize in Physics for it. Inside each cable run hair-thin strands of that ultra-pure glass. A pulse of light enters at one end and travels by bouncing along the inside of the strand, trapped by the glass itself, flickering on and off billions of times a second. A single cable can carry terabits of data every second, trillions of bits, enough for the calls, films, and messages of whole nations at once. This is also why satellites never took over. Even the largest satellite networks carry only a small fraction of what one cable can, and sending a signal all the way to orbit and back adds a delay you can feel. For sheer capacity, nothing beats light in glass. So we laid the glass across the ocean floor. Which brings us back to how easily it breaks. Every year, somewhere between 150 and 200 of these cables are damaged. The culprits are almost never dramatic. Roughly 3/4 of all breaks come from ordinary ships dragging their anchors, and from fishing gear scraping along the seabed. There is a popular story that sharks are eating the internet, biting the cables in the deep. It makes a wonderful headline. It is also, mostly, a myth. Bites from sharks and other fish have caused less than 1% of all faults, and in recent years, essentially none. The real danger has always been us. And when a cable breaks in the wrong place, the damage reaches far beyond one country. In early 2024, in the Red Sea, a cargo ship was struck and abandoned. As it drifted and sank, its anchor dragged across the sea floor and cut 3 separate cables at once. Connections slowed or faltered for as many as 100 million people across parts of Africa and the Middle East. Even Tonga's story had a hidden depth to it. The volcano did not simply snap the cable with its blast. It sent avalanches of ash and rock racing down the sea floor at over 120 kilometers an hour, shredding the cable along more than 100 kilometers of ocean bottom. The sea itself had become the weapon. For most of these cables' history, such breaks were accidents. Lately, that assumption has begun to crack. Since 2023, in the shallow, crowded waters of the Baltic Sea, cable after cable has been damaged under suspicious circumstances. Investigators found a drag mark scored across the seabed for kilometers, apparently left by a ship's anchor. Vessels were seized, among them a tanker called the Eagle S, linked to a shadowy fleet moving sanctioned oil. Two explanations sit side by side, and weighing them honestly is the hard part. The first is the old, ordinary one. Anchors drag in busy seas, and they always have. The second is darker, that some of these cuts are deliberate, quiet acts of sabotage in a tense world, designed to look like accidents. So far, the darker story remains unproven. In 2025, a court dismissed the case against the crew of the Eagle S, unable to show they had meant to do it. Another seized ship was quietly released. At sea, in the dark, intent is almost impossible to prove. What we can say with confidence is this: the physics is settled, and it is beautiful. Light, trapped in pure glass, carrying a civilization's words across the ocean floor. The network is real, it is vast, and it is more resilient than any single break suggests. When one cable fails, data reroutes through others, and repair ships sail out, haul the broken ends up from the deep, and splice them back together. Most faults are accidents. Most get fixed. The system, most days, quietly holds. But underneath that calm sit real, open questions. Only about 60 specialized ships in the entire world can repair these cables, and that fleet is old. Roughly half of it will reach the end of its working life within the next 15 years, with little being built to replace it. The cables funnel through a handful of narrow choke points where a few well-placed breaks could do enormous harm. And no one can yet say for certain whether the recent wave of cuts is bad luck or the opening moves of something deliberate. We built a global nervous system out of glass and laid it in the dark, and we are only now beginning to ask how well we are guarding it. The next time you send a message across the world and it arrives in an instant, it is worth remembering where it actually went. Not up into a weightless cloud. Down, into the cold and the dark, along a thread of glass thinner than your finger, resting on the floor of an ocean almost no one will ever see. The most modern thing we have runs through one of the most fragile. And for now, it holds.